the reason that Joe Biden remains a danger to the country, despite the fact that he's effectively senile and not with it at this point, is specifically because he is not going to be stymieing his left-wing base. The left-wing base is taking control of the party completely. How do you know this? Well, over the past several days, there has been this real push, this very, very hard push to tear down all the statues, right? Not just the statues of Confederate generals, to blow up Mount Rushmore. I mean, I predicted this, but there's a campaign afoot to change Mount Rushmore. There's a campaign afoot to get rid of the Jefferson Memorial. And there's a campaign to get rid of statues of George Washington. Nancy Pelosi is now caving to this. And Nancy Pelosi was asked yesterday about tearing down statues. And she said, well, maybe we should consider whether any statues ought to exist. I mean, this is wild stuff. These mainstream Democratic politicians who run the party caving to the woke base of their party that wants to rip down statues of the founders of the country, which again is endemic of a certain ideology that is truly ugly about the United States. Here is Nancy Pelosi yesterday with the Washington Post.
These Confederates, Jefferson Davis, Alexander Stephens, they committed treason against the United States in the name of slavery. I think that's a different story. But you know what? Subject everything to scrutiny and make a decision. But I do think we should do it in a safer way rather than a more dangerous way.
Subjected all to scrutiny. Jefferson, Washington. And she says, yeah, it's different. It's different for like Jefferson Davis, which of course is true. But then she's like, well, maybe let's consider all of it. Joe Biden's campaign. When I say that this has infected the entire Democratic infrastructure, so the Daily Caller reached out to the Biden campaign and asked them if the former vice president agrees with Democrats who want to tear down statues of George Washington, Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, and some depictions of Jesus. The campaign was given over 24 hours to respond to the inquiry. They did not do so. That is not a shock at all. Of course they're not going to do so. The entire campaign of Joe Biden is to play dead, to appease his woke base. Now, what will he do when he's in office? So I don't think he's stupid enough to actually attempt to tear this sort of stuff down, but I also do not think that he is in control of his own party. And I think that his own party has gone so far off the rails at this point that it's being dictated to by the likes of Nicole Hannah-Jones, the founder of the 1619 Project. And Nicole Hannah-Jones, there's a whole now nationwide discussion prompted by a bad essay by Nicole Hannah-Jones on slavery reparations that likens the death of Michael Brown to lynchings from 1910 in Oklahoma. I mean, it's an absurd piece. It's being discussed ad nauseum on television today because the Democratic Party has been taken over by the wokest members of the wokest members of their political clique. By the way, I think it's important to note where Nicole Hannah-Jones is coming from. So here's the thing. If you wrote something like 25, 30 years ago, and then you repudiate it and you say, yeah, that was a bad idea. That was a stupid thing to write. I get it. I've done it myself. Right? I was writing from the time I was 17 years old. And when you write publicly, you are subjected to scrutiny, as you should be. I have an entire list online of things that I have said from the time I was young that I regret having said and thought was stupid or bad. Right? That's all normal. That's a normal thing in public discourse. So it is not outside the realm of reality to ask about Nicole Hannah-Jones, about this letter to the editor that she apparently wrote. This is according to The Federalist reporting today. Jordan Davidson reporting over at The Federalist. A letter from Nicole Hannah-Jones to the editor of the school newspaper at Notre Dame. Now, this doesn't mean anybody should be canceled. I'm not saying Nicole Hannah-Jones should be canceled. She shouldn't be canceled. In fact, I think it's very good that the New York Times is just allowing her free reign over there so we can see that the New York Times is a trash compost heap, that it's just garbage. Because, frankly, the 1619 Project is garbage in and of itself enough that, I don't need further cause to think that Nicole Hannah-Jones is very bad at her job. I've read you enough quotes of her saying crazy things that I don't think you need more proof that she's bad at her job. But it does go to the question of sort of motivation and whether she has changed her opinion on any of this stuff, because it's coming from a lot of the same places. Here is what she wrote back when she was in college. She wrote, I find it hard to believe that any member of the white race can have the audacity and hypocrisy to call any other culture savage. The white race is the biggest murderer, rapist, pillager, and thief of the modern world. Europeans have colonized and destroyed the indigenous populations on every continent of this planet. They've committed genocide against cultures that have never offended them in their greed and insatiable desire to control and dominate every non-white culture. Christopher Columbus and those like him were no different than Hitler. The crimes they committed were unnecessarily cruel and can be only described as acts of the devil. Africans had been to the Americas long before Columbus or any Europeans. The difference is that Africans had the decency and respect for human life to learn from the Native Americans and train technology with them. This is a weird thing. The pyramids of the Aztecs and the great stone heads of the Olmecs are lasting monuments to the friendship of these two peoples. Well, that's an interesting take on where those monuments came from. But as David Walker wrote in his Appeal of 1829, the white men acted, quote, more like devils than accountable men. Whites have always been an unjust, jealous, unmerciful, avaricious, and bloodthirsty set of beings, always seeking after power and authority. It was not enough for whites to come to the Americas and learn. They looked upon the native people as inferior and a people to be annihilated. Their lasting monument was the destruction and enslavement of two races of people. Using Christianity as their excuse, the white race denied the native people their humanity. Not only did they rape and murder the indigenous peoples of America, they killed off many more by introducing diseases which came from filth and uncleanliness to the native people. Poop only existed in Europe. The white race used deceit and trickery, warfare and rape to steal the land from people who had lived here for thousands and thousands of years. Over and over again, whites made peace treaties with the Native Americans, telling them if they moved just this one time and gave up their land to the greedy settlers just this one last time, they would never have to move again. It was common knowledge that the white man's word could not be trusted. Even today, the descendants of these savage people pump drugs and guns into the black community, pack black people into the squalor of segregated urban ghettos, and continue to be bloodsuckers in our communities. Yes, it was Columbus that set the platforms for these racist American institutions. A devil calling someone a savage is like a pot calling the kettle black. But after everything these barbaric devils did, I do not hate them or their descendants. I understand that because of some lacking, they felt they needed to constantly prove their superiority. Okay, the wild stuff, right? So here's the thing. Again, she shouldn't be canceled over this because I don't think people should be canceled over opinions generally. I think it's a complete waste of time. And it's not like we didn't know that this is the kind of stuff that she was writing back in college, because she basically writes a watered-down version of this today. It is just it seems to me, very important to recognize the root ideology that is now being promulgated in the Democratic Party at its most crude form. And by the way, it's not just Nikole Hannah-Jones. Like, she's an ideological thought leader and obviously the de facto editor of the New York Times at this point. But it's people like Jamelle Bouie. Jamelle Bouie literally just said the other day, quote, neither Abraham Lincoln nor the Republican Party freed the slaves. Instead, the slaves freed the slaves. Emancipation was, quote, something they took for themselves. The most that can be said of Lincoln and the nation's political leadership is that they, quote, helped set freedom in motion and eventually codified it into law with the 13th Amendment. Bouie says that the Union Army basically only delivered the news of the Emancipation Proclamation. What? Yes, Black Americans were very important in contributing to the abolitionist movement. Also, hundreds of thousands of white men died to free black slaves. Abraham Lincoln spent his presidency working to free black slaves. Abolitionism was a longtime cause in the white community in the United States. William Lloyd Garrison, right? I mean, like, this is just it's so ignorant on every level and stupid on every level and divisive on every level. But, you know, this is the new narrative. The new narrative is that America is root evil and that it's root evil and racially divided in its entirety. That's the ideology that's taken over the Democratic Party, and it's really, really, really dangerous stuff. It's really dangerous stuff. And the fact that Biden is not forcibly disavowing that sort of ideology, that does not speak to a moderate presidency should he ever gain power. Did you know that every like on this video creates one additional leftist tier? Don't ask me why. That's called science. To take advantage of this amazing opportunity, hit the like button.